Welcome to CSE 121 to exercise 24B. This will be working with the console in Python Anywhere, a little review of working with the console and working with the MySQL interpreter and also the Python interpreter, and then creating a database. We're going to create a MySQL database and we'll create it from scratch. Why not? So instead of just importing a SQL database that I already created, we're going to create it and we'll use W3 Schools to help us out. So again, let's get back to Python Anywhere. And you haven't created a database yet. The only thing you've done, if I go to my dashboard here, I'm in my dashboard, I have no consoles open right now. And just to know your way around, if you go to consoles, you may have a console open if you've done something, and you could just hit a little X here to close it. Now I don't have any open. Here's files. The only thing I have in files is I created this databases directory. Is there anything in it? No, because here's my path up here. I'm in the username HOMA-RCN. There's nothing in databases right now. Now we are going to upload something from there, and we can actually do that right now if you want to do it. So let's do this, and then we'll get used to the console a little bit. So I'm in my databases directory, and I'm going to upload a file. Now what am I going to upload? Now what am I going to upload? Well, if I go to Documents and Resources, and I go down to Unit 12, here's 24states.zip, and all you can do is download it. Now, one thing I want to remind you is do not unzip it because we have to upload it in zip format. Just like in my Warren, we can't upload certain files, but we can upload a zip file. So this is actually a folder with 2 files in it. So we're going to download this first. So I'm just going to click on this and download it. You can either right click on it and do Save Link As and put it in your downloads, or you might be able to just click on it and have it go to your downloads. That's what mine did. So it's in my downloads right now. So however you get it in your downloads, there it is. Now, when it's in your downloads, we want to go back to Python Anywhere and upload that folder. So I'm going to just go to upload a file. And again, I'm in my databases directory. Remember, I was in files and I'm in databases. You should have created this in the first video, but if you didn't, just make a new directory and call it databases. So I'll go in here. So I'm in that directory, databases, upload the file, and I'll go to my downloads. And there it is, 24-states.zip. I'm going to select that archive, and it's really a folder, and there it is. Now, if you go to double click on it, it will not extract. So you can't extract it right here. Where do you extract it? Well, that's where we're going to do a little console practice. So we're going to go to consoles, and we have Bash console, MySQL console. We can go into Python consoles, all this kind of stuff. Matter of fact, let's go into the Bash console. And this is like using terminal on a Mac. And again, your $sign is your root directory. If you want to see where you're at, remember you could do pwd, and you can see you're in your username. Now the $sign is what basically indicates that. That's kind of your root directory, but you're in home, you're in your username. That's your username right there. And if you do ls, you remember doing some of this early on? It's showing that there's a README text file in there and also a databases folder that's in there. Now, what we're going to do is go into that databases folder. So let's do cd space, and we'll use databases. And you have to spell it right. So we're changing directory to databases. Databases should be the same thing. Now you can copy and paste things in here. And then what you'll do is you'll just hit enter. So now I'm in that directory, and I could do ls just to see what's in there. That's like list what's in there. And you can see there's 24states.zip. So it's in there, it made it in there. Now how do we unzip that? Well, we use unzip and a space, and then you can copy this, just that line. You could do Control C and Control V, or Command if you're on a Mac, and it should unzip space that file. Now let's hit return. And it did all this stuff. Now we're going to look at this. Now if you want to get out of your Bash console, you could type exit, and hit enter. Console's closed. Now how do you get back to where you were? Use your hamburger menu over here and go to consoles, and there's no consoles. And let's see what we did with our files. Let's go to files. And let's go into databases. Now there it is. There's 24 states. That's the folder that we unzipped. So we unzip that. And there's also this. Now, if it's unzipped, like I'm going to click on this, 24 states. You can see there's states.txt, states.working code. That's what we want. DS store, we don't need that. You can trash that and hit OK. Now go back to databases. This Mac OS X, we don't need that. Trash it. And the zip we no longer need because we already unzipped it. If you can see this folder, then you don't need the zip archive and you can trash that. And that should be it. And you can go into here and you're in that directory and you'll see these two files. Now one is an SQL file and one is a text file. Let's look at the text file. And you can see this is just a text file of states, 50 states, and it has some kind of headings at the top, and we'll talk about that. Now I'll go back here. Now we're working in the same tab right now, so we're not working in any new tab. So if I go back here, it's going to get out of that file. And then I'll go into working code. And here's working code. This is an SQL file. We're going to actually create a database, or actually populate a database in this file. And we're going to put code in here. We're going to do it from scratch. Instead of just importing an SQL file, we're going to create one. So we're going to do that. And what we're going to do first is create a database, an empty database, and then we're going to populate it. So let's close this up. Now you don't have to close this up. You can just go to your dashboard again. And one thing just to point out, when we work on files, you do have to save. This isn't like Replit where you can just do code and it's going to autosave. So when we work on files in here, we do have to save them. So let's go back to our dashboard. And what we're going to do next is go to databases. And you should have a default database in there called HOMA RCN. Well, it won't be called HOMA RCN. It'll be your username $default if you set up your MySQL password. And we're going to create a new database. And let's do that right now. Let's just create a database called states lowercase. Make sure it's lowercase. Case means a lot, so just make it lowercase. And it says your database name always starts with your username plus a $, just like this. So, but that'll be there by default, so you don't have to put that. So you just have to put states. And you shouldn't have to set your MySQL password again. Let's just go states, and then just hit create. And there it is. Now you have your second database. Now what we can do quickly is click on our database, and this will take us into the MySQL Interpreter. Now watch what happens. We'll click on this. So we don't have to go through bash. This will launch us right in there. And it'll say loading MySQL Interpreter. Instead of the $ that you usually see when you're in bash, it has this little prompt, just like Python will have 3 arrows that I'll go over when I show you the Python interpreter as well. So now we're in MySQL, and we could write some MySQL or SQL commands, which is a structured query language. So one of the ones we could do is do show tables, because we're in a database. We're in this database. I'm going to put show tables, and typically we put it in all caps, and I'll end it with a semicolon and hit enter. And it's saying empty set because we don't have anything in our database yet. We don't have a table in our database. And we're going to do that in our next video. Also, another thing I'll show here is just select. And I got an error, so I think I need to put select database and a semicolon. Okay, and that shows me the database that I'm working in. And that's all I really need to know right there is I'm in that database and I have no tables. So I can exit out of here. So I'll just type in exit. And it'll say console closed. Now it'll still stay here, it won't go away. So I'll just go back to the dashboard. And I have no consoles open right now. We could go to consoles. Do we have any consoles open? We don't. Now one other thing I just want to point out before we build our database is you can also do a Python console. Or you can get there through the console in bash. You could go to bash just like we were doing MySQL. So bash is kind of the outer shell, and then there's MySQL, which is an interpreter, and there's Python interpreter. So we're in bash. Usually when you see the $, that's bash. So if you wanted to go into Python, you could just type Python and hit enter. And that goes by default into Python 2.7, which is an old version. Now, if you want to quit the interpreter, so when you see these three kind of lines here, you can do Python work in here, but we're in 2.7, so I'm going to quit. And I'm going to put quit and put a parentheses, just like it's a method or a function. So we have to use the parentheses in here, where we don't use it in bash, because we're kind of in the interpreter right now. See, this kind of launched the interpreter. And I'll hit enter. And now if I want to use Python 3.8, I could type Python 3.8, hit enter. Now I'm in the Python 3.8 interpreter. And what can you do in here? Well, you can do x equals 2, enter, y equals 3, enter, print x times y, and you get 6. Not a lot of fun working in the Python interpreter, but if that's all you have, that may be necessary, but we're not going to do that. We like to work in a IDE, a integrated development environment. This is just kind of our console here. Now if I want to get out of here, I put quit. And if I want to leave the console, I type exit. And it looks like MySQL leaves that way as well. So now it's closed. Although it's right here, it doesn't just go away. You have to go back to the dashboard. All right, so that's just a little console practice. And in part 2 of 24B, what we're going to do is build our database, because there's nothing in our database, so we now have to build it. So we're going to do that in part 2. We're going to build our database. And we're going to use W3 Schools and use some of this SQL in here to actually build our database. Insert into, and then we can do some queries. We don't really have to get into SQL because we're going to use Python, but we can do a little bit of that. So we're going to do that next, but just wanted to give a little review of the console a little bit, working with files, just something a little bit different, just so you can know your way around consoles, interpreters, and also something different than Replit. Even though you can do some of this in Replit, we can't build real databases, MySQL databases in Replit and actually use them. So that's why we're using Python Anywhere. So we'll see you in part 2 of 24B.